Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam Grantharaja Ki Jai. Janmadyasya yato niviyad itaratas chate svavigya swarat.
Janmadyasya yatam vayaditaratas chate svavigya swarat.
Tene brahma hridaya adhikavaye muyantiyat surayaha.
Tene brahma hridaya adhikavaye muyantiyat suraya.
Tejo varimadam yata vinimayo yatra trisargo misha.
Tejo varimridam yata vinimayo yatra trisargo misha.
Damna svena sada nirasta kuhakam satyam param dhimahi.
Dhamna svena sada nirasta kuhakam satyam param dhimahi.
O my Lord, Sri Kṛṣna, son of Vyāsadeva.
O my Lord, Sri Kṛṣna, son of
O
Vyāsadeva.
all-pervading personality of Godhead.
O all-pervading personality of Godhead.
My respectful obeisance unto you.
I offer my respectful obeisance unto you.
I meditate upon Lord Sri Kṛṣna because he is the absolute truth.
I meditate upon Lord Sri Kṛṣna because he is the absolute
And the primeval cause of all causes.
and the primeval cause of all
Of
causes.
the creation, sustenance, and destruction of the manifested universes.
Of the creation, sustenance, and destruction of the manifested universe.
He is directly and indirectly conscious of all
He is
manifestations.
directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations.
And he is independent because there is no other cause beyond him.
And he is independent because there is no other cause beyond
It is
him.
he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahmaji,
It is the only who first imparted Vedic knowledge into the heart of
the
Brahma.
original living being.
The original living being.
By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion,
By him, even the great sages and demigods are pleasant.
as one is bewildered by the illusory representation
As one is bewildered by the result.
of water seen on fire or land seen on water.
Water seen on fire, land seen on water.
Only because of him do the material universes,
Only because of him do the material universe.
temporarily manifested by the reactions of the three modes of nature,
Temporarily manifested by the reaction of three modes of
appear
nature.
factual although they are unreal.
Appear factual, although they are
I
unreal.
therefore meditate upon him, Lord Sri Kṛṣna,
I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Shri
who is eternally existent in the transcendental abode,
who is eternally existent in the transcendental abode,
which is forever free from the illusory representations in the material world.
which is forever free from the illusory representation of the
I
material world.
meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth.
I meditate upon him from he is the absolute truth.
Dharma pujita kaitravocha,
Dharma prajita kaitavutra,
paramo nirmatsaranam satam,
paramo nirmasaranam satam,
vedyam vastavam atra vastu,
vedyam vastavam astravastu,
shivadam tapa trayon bulanam,
shivadam taputrayomanam,
Śrīmad-Bhāgavate Mahamuni Krite,
Śrīmad-Bhāgavate Mahamuni
Kim
Krite,
va parir Ishvaraha,
Kim va paririshvaraha,
Sadyo Hridi Avarudyate-tra,
Sadyo Rudya Varudya Titra,
Kriti Bihi Sususubhistakshana,
Kritibhi Shushubhishtakyanat,
completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated.
completely rejecting all religious activities which are material
This
motivated.
Bhagavad Purana propounds the highest truth,
This Bhagavad Purana propounds the highest truth,
which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart.
which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure.
The
in
highest
heart.
truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all.
The highest truth, the reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all.
Such truth uproots the threefold miseries.
Such a truth uproots the threefold miseries.
This beautiful Bhagavatam compiled by the great sage Vyāsadeva in his maturity
This beautiful Bhagavatam compiled by the great sage Vyāsadeva is
is
maturity.
sufficient in itself for God realization.
It is sufficient itself for God realization.
What is the need of any other scripture?
What is the need of the other scripture?
As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam,
As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of
by this
Bhagavatam,
culture of knowledge,
by this culture of
the
knowledge,
Supreme Lord is established within his heart.
the Supreme Lord is established within his heart.
Nigama kalpaturur galitam phalam,
Nigama kalpataro galitam
sukhamukad amrita dravya samyutam,
Sukamukad amrita dravasangitam
pibata Bhagavatam rasam alayam,
Pibata Bhagavatam rasamrayam
muhur ahoraskabu vibhavakaha.
Murura Hurasika Bhuvivavaka.
O expert and thoughtful men, relish Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam,
O expert and thoughtful man, relish Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam,
the mature fruit of the desired tree of Vedic
the
literatures.
mature fruit of the desired tree of Vedic literatures.
It emanated from the lips of Sri Sukhdev Goswami.
It says, emanated from the lips of Śukadeva Gosvāmī.
Therefore, this fruit has become even more tasteful.
Therefore, this food has become even more tasteful.
Although its nectarian juice was already relishable for all,
Although its nectarian juice was already relishable for all,
including liberated souls.
including liberated souls.
Shinvatam Swakata Kṛṣna,
Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam Swakata Kṛṣna,
Punya Shravana Kirtana,
Punya Shravana Kirtana,
Vidyantakstohi Abhadrani,
Vidyantastohi Abhadrani,
Vidunoti Srihitsatam.
Vidu Noti Surisatam.
To hear about Kṛṣna from Vedic literatures
to hear about Krishna from the Vedic literature,
or to hear from him directly through the Bhagavad Gita,
or to hear from it directly through the Bhagavad Gita,
is itself righteous activity.
it is self-righteous activity.
And for one who hears about Krishna,
And for one who hears about Krishna,
Lord Krishna is dwelling in everyone's heart,
Lord Krishna is dwelling within everyone's heart,
acts as a best wishing friend,
acts as the best wishes,
and purifies the devotee who constantly engages in hearing of him.
purify the devotee who constantly engage in hearing.
Astapresu abhadresu nityam bhagavata sevaya
Nityam Bhagavata
bhagavati uttamasloke
Bhagavati Uttamasloke
bhaktir bhavati naistiki.
Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki.
In this way, a devotee naturally develops his dormant transcendental knowledge.
And this way devotee naturally develops his dormant transcendental knowledge.
As he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavatam
As he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavatam
and from the devotees,
and from the
he
devotees,
becomes fixed in the devotional service of the Lord.
he becomes fixed in devotional service of the Lord.
Tadarajastamo bhava
Tadarajastamo bhava
kamalobhadayaschaye
Kamalobhadayascha
cheta itar anavidam
Cheta itaranavida
stitvam sattve prasidhati.
Tam sarve prasidati.
By development of devotional service,
By development of devotional service,
one becomes freed from the modes of passion and ignorance,
one becomes freed from the modes of passion of
and thus material lust and avarice are diminished.
and its material lust and avarice are diminished.
Evam prasana manaso
Evam prasana manas
Bhagavad Bhakti Yogataha Bhagavad Tattva Vijnanam
Bhagavat Tattva Vijnana
Mukta Sangasya Jayate.
Mukta Sangasya Jayate.
When these impurities are wiped away,
These impurities are wiped
the
away.
candidate remains steady in his position of pure goodness,
The candidate is steady in his position of pure
becomes
goodness,
enlivened by devotional service,
becomes enlivened by devotional service,
and understands the science of God perfectly.
and understands the science of God perfectly.
Vidyate hridaya grantis
Vidyate Hridaya Grantis
Chidyante sarva samsaya
Chidyante Sarva
Siyante chasya karmani
Siyante Sachakarmani.
Jasta evat manishwari. Thus, Bhakti Yoga severs the hard knot of material affection
That's the Bhakti Yoga serves the hard, not the material,
and enables one to come at once to the stage of a samsayam samagram,
and enable one to come at once to the stage of assumption.
understanding of the supreme absolute truth, personality of God.
Understanding the supreme absolute truth, personality of God.
Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna or from his devotee in Krishna consciousness
Therefore, only by hearing from Krishna or from his devotee in Krishna
can one
consciousness
understand the science of Krishna.
can one understand the science of
Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 19, Verse 25. Tacha bhavet Bhagavan Vyāsaputro
Tatra bhavad bhagavan Vyāsaputro
Yadrichayagam Atmano Napeksha
Yadrichayagam Atamanunopikya
Alakshalingo Nijalabhatusto
Alachalingo Nijalabhatusto
Vritaschabalir Avaduta Vesha.
Vritas Jabalai Avaduta Vesha.
Translation by Srila Prabhupada. At that moment, there appeared the powerful son of Vyāsadeva, who traveled over the earth, disinterested and satisfied with himself. He did not manifest any symptoms of belonging to any social order or status of life. He was surrounded with women and children, and he dressed as if others had neglected him. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The word Bhagavan is sometimes used in relation with some of the great devotees of the Lord, like Sukhdev Goswami. Such liberated souls are disinterested in the affairs of this material world because they are self-satisfied by the great achievements of devotional service. As explained before, Śukadeva Goswami never accepted any formal spiritual master, nor did he undergo any formal reformatory performances. His father, Vyāsadeva, was his natural spiritual master because Śukadeva Goswami heard Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam from him. After this, he became completely self-satisfied. Thus, he was not dependent on any formal process. The formal processes are necessary for those who are expected to reach the stage of complete liberation. But Sri Śukadeva Goswami was already in that status by the grace of his father. As a young boy, he was expected to be properly dressed, but he went about naked and was uninterested in social customs. He was neglected by the general populace, and inquisitive boys and women surrounded him as if he were a madman. He thus appears on the scene while traveling on the earth of his own accord. It appears that upon the inquiry of Maharaj Parikshit, the great sages were not unanimous in their decision as to what was to be done. For spiritual salvation, there were many prescriptions according to the different modes of different persons. But the ultimate aim of life is to attain the highest perfectional stage of devotional service to the Lord. As doctors differ, so also sages differ in their different prescriptions. While such things were going on, the great and powerful son of Vyāsadeva appeared on the scene. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So to become Krishna conscious and not, it is very simple and direct and easy, but due to many lifetimes of taking birth and going through old age, disease, and death, and then taking birth again, different species, eventually coming to the human form of life. Even in the human form of life, although there are 400,000 species, very few are civilized. Most human beings are uncivilized. So we could safely say in the United States, most of the people are uncivilized. And then if you say that in public, many people would object. What do you mean we're uncivilized? We have the best civilization in the history of the world. But actually, a civilization in which they kill and eat cows, they abort defenseless babies, they permit people to commit suicide, assisted suicide. They have public display of pornography. They're not really interested in stopping drug addiction. In fact, they encourage it in many ways. And so on. There's so many things that's going on. Women and children are usually abused. Elderly people are abused. Spiritual authorities are mocked. So you can go down a list. All these things are signs of a very low-class society. We're living in a very low-class society. And it's uncivilized. It's not, they're not advanced in any way. They might say we're advanced technologically, but that doesn't really mean that much as far as the goal of life is concerned. So, even if someone becomes a devotee, and that's good, but still, to attain the goal of this whole enterprise of becoming a devotee is not that simple. Although the process is simple, but it's not that simple for people. Therefore, Kṛṣna says in the 11th chapter, 53rd verse, Naham Vedācha tapasa na dānina na chejya sakya evam vido drastum dristavam asimam yata. 11th chapter, 53rd verse. He says to Arjuna, the form you are seeing with your transcendental eyes cannot be understood simply by studying the Vedas, nor by undergoing serious penances, nor by charity, nor by worship. It is not by these means that one can see me as I am. And related to this verse is another verse in the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, 7th canto, 7th chapter, 51st and 52nd verses, where it says, Prahlāda Maharaj is speaking, he's talking to his schoolmates after his demoniac teachers left the room for a short while. And he says, my dear friends, O sons of the demons, You cannot please the Supreme Personality of Godhead by becoming perfect brāhmaṇas, demigods, or great saints, or by becoming perfectly good in etiquette or vast learning. None of these qualifications can awaken the pleasure of the Lord, nor by charity, austerity, sacrifice, cleanliness, or vows can one satisfy the Lord. The Lord is pleased only if one has unflinching, unalloyed devotion to Him. Without sincere devotional service, everything is simply a show. So, with these two verses, although the process is simple, it's easy to do, but many people are not clearly, do not clearly understand what the goal of the process is. And thus they get sidetracked by all these different things, such as becoming a performing brāhmaṇa, even though they say the mantras nicely and do all those things, or even becoming a demigod, or even becoming a great saint. Still, they may be far away from the goal of Krishna consciousness. So, Prabhupada writes, Prahlāda Maharaj concludes that one can become perfect by serving the Supreme Lord sincerely by all means. Material elevation to life as a brāhmana, demigod, rishi, and so on are not causes for developing love of Godhead. But if one sincerely engages in the service of the Lord, his Krishna consciousness is complete. This is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, 9 chapter 30th verse. Apichet sudaracharo bhajante mam ananya bhak sadur eva samantavya samyak vyavasito hi saha. Even if one commits the most abominable actions, if he is engaged in devotional service, he is to be considered saintly because he is properly situated. So Prabhupada continues, to develop unalloyed love of Krishna is the perfection of life. Other processes may be helpful, but if one does not develop his love for Krishna, these other processes are simply a waste of time. What are those other processes? Study of the Vedas, undergoing serious penances and austerities, charity, worship, and so many other things that we already named. So all these things are considered a useless waste of time. And dharma svanustitak pumsa visvaksena katasuyat. Yet not pada yad yadiratim shrama evahi kevalam. So this verse in the 9th chapter says, duties or dharma executed by men regardless of occupation are so much useless labor if they do not provoke attraction for the message of the Supreme Lord. Bhagavatam 1:2-8. The test of perfection is one's unalloyed devotion to the Lord. So, Prahlāda Maharaj continues. He says, my dear friends, O sons of demons, in the same favorable way that one sees himself and takes care of himself, take the devotional service to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is present everywhere as the super soul of all living beings, or all living entities. So, when it says, in the same favorable way that one sees himself and takes care of himself, so that is, there's a special word for that, and we've mentioned this before, atmo pamyena, which means thinking others to be like oneself. One can very intelligently conclude that without devotional service, without becoming Krishna conscious, one cannot be happy. Therefore, the duty of all devotees is to preach Krishna consciousness everywhere, all over the world, because all living entities without Krishna consciousness are suffering the pangs of material existence. To preach Krishna consciousness is the best welfare activity. Indeed, it is described by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as para upakara, work for the true benefit of others. The activities of para upakara have been especially entrusted to those who have taken birth in India as human beings. So we read that before. But this understanding of how the real goal of Krishna consciousness, savai pumsa paro dharmo yato bhakti rahoksaje haiki pratihata yayat master prasidati. It's paro dharma, the supreme dharma or supreme occupational duty is to develop pure love and devotion for Krishna. That's not something that can be imitated or feigned. Feigned means to pretend you're on that level, or we're on that level. It's something absolutely genuine. Just like a mother's sincere love for her child. It's something normally that's genuine. And she's ready to sacrifice her life for the child if necessary. So, in the Bhagavad Gita also it says, Avajanati mam udha manasim tanam asritaha. Krishna says that he's not visible to foolish persons who deride him or make fun of him or blaspheme him. And his body and his actual existence is completely spiritual and full of bliss and knowledge and eternity. So his body is never a material body. So people regularly insult Krishna by thinking he's just some extraordinary human being. Somehow or other he was elected or made to be a god. And it's maybe due to superstition or ignorance. So these kinds of statements made by scholars and other people. I was once in a meeting in a big hotel in Seattle, and there were representatives of the Indian government there, and one of the representatives insulted Krishna, making fun of him as if he's some lusty man. So these are the type of people that are the leaders of society in India. So you can see how dangerous Kali Yuga is, where such low-class people can have positions of authority. So some people, Prabhupada says, but some people who make a study of Krishna by reading Bhagavad Gita or similar Vedic literatures, Krishna is a problem for them. For one using a material process, Krishna is considered to be a great historical personality and very learned philosopher. But he is an ordinary man, and even though he was so powerful, he had to accept a material body. This is the way they think. This is what they teach their students. This is what they're presenting to the public. Ultimately, they think that the Absolute Truth is impersonal. Therefore, they think that from his impersonal feature, he assumed a personal feature attached to material nature. Now, these are some of the best, let's say, so-called modern philosophers like Dr. Radhakrishnan, an Indian, a South Indian. He was vice president, and then he became president of India, very prestigious positions, right? And he wrote books. And most of his books were just insulting Krishna, making all kinds of speculative claims about Krishna. Ultimately, they think that the Absolute Truth is impersonal. Therefore, they think that from his impersonal feature, he assumed a personal feature attached to material nature. So, avyaktim vyaktim apana manyate mam abudaya param bhava majananto mamavyam anuttamam. So that's a verse, 7th chapter, Bhagavad Gita. Krishna says ignorant persons think that I have that the ultimate truth is impersonal, and that I have assumed some personal form. The verse is specifically echoing, because even in Krishna's time, there were some people like that. The 7th chapter, 24th verse, where he says, unintelligent men who do not know me perfectly think that I, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, was impersonal before and have now assumed this personality. Due to their small knowledge, they do not know my higher nature, which is imperishable and supreme. So this type of narrative is very common in India, and it's spread around even to the Western world. So those who are in search of knowledge also speculate on Kṛṣna, so now he's talking about jnanis, and consider him to be less important than the universal form of the Supreme, the Virat Rupa. Thus, some think that the universal form of Kṛṣna, which was manifested to Arjuna, is more important than his personal form. According to them, the personal form of the Supreme is something imaginary. They believe that in the ultimate issue, the absolute truth is not a person. But the transcendental process is described in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 4. To hear about Kṛṣna from authorities, tatvidi paripatena paripasnena sevaya upadekshami te jnanam jnaninas tatvadarshanaha. To hear about Kṛṣna from bona fide guru. That is the actual Vedic process, and those who are actually in the Vedic line hear from Kṛṣna from authority, and by repeated hearing about him, Kṛṣna becomes dear. Notice it says, repeated hearing about him, Kṛṣna becomes dear. Okay, and so, as we have several times discussed, Kṛṣna is covered by his Yoga Maya potency. He is not to be seen or revealed to anyone and everyone. Only by one to whom he reveals himself can he be seen. This is confirmed in the Vedic literature. For one who is a surrendered soul, the absolute truth can actually be understood. Well, that's a very important verse also. And again, in the 7th chapter, Kṛṣna says, Naham Vaksasarvasya Yogamaya Samadvitaha Mudo Yam Nabijananti Loko Mam Ajam Avyayam. I am never manifest to the foolish and unintelligent. The 7th chapter, 25th verse. For them, I am covered by my internal potency, that's Yogamaya, and therefore they do not know that I am unborn and infallible. So, Kṛṣna is the master of Yogamaya energy, by which he is covered and uncovered. So if there's a sincere devotee who's completely dedicated to Kṛṣna, he can manifest himself. But if there are people who are mocking Kṛṣna, making fun of him, they can never see Kṛṣna. Because we're covered by Maya, and he's covered by Yoga Maya. So it's not, you have to overcome both coverings. Already to overcome the covering of Maya on ourselves is almost impossible. But it's completely impossible to uncover the Yoga Maya effulgence, or the Brahma Jyoti, that's inhibiting the non-devotees from seeing Kṛṣna, even though they've become liberated from Maya. So we see that very few people actually become genuinely Kṛṣna conscious. But the process is easy, and anyone can do it. It doesn't matter if they're literate or illiterate. It doesn't matter if they have high rationality, etc. Anyone can attain perfection in Kṛṣna consciousness, from any position. So therefore it continues. It says, only by one to whom he reveals himself can he be seen. Yeah, now this is, again, another verse in Bhagavad Gita, which says, Bhaktya tvananyaya sakya aham evam vidurirjana yatam drastum chitatvena pravestam cha parantapa. Krishna says, 1854, my dear Arjuna, only by undivided devotional service can I be understood as I am, standing before you, and can thus be seen directly. Only in this way can you enter into the mysteries of my understanding. So, therefore, Yasya Devi Parabhaktir Yata Devi Tata Guru Tasyaite Katitahi Artak Prakasante Mahatmanaha. In the Svitasvatara Upanishad 6:23, Krishna says that one who has unflinching devotion for the Supreme Lord and is directed by the spiritual master, in whom he has similar unflinching faith, can he or she see the Supreme Personality of Godhead by revelation. So that's the point, is revelation. Krishna consciousness is revelation theology. It's not based on following formularies. It's based on sincere devotion for the Lord. Therefore, it says also in the Vedic scriptures, Nayam Atma Pravarchanena. This is a verse that says that the Lord is only reveals himself to a sincere devotee. Okay, so these are all very important principles of Krishna consciousness that elude most people. In other words, most people ignore them, or they're not conscious of these things, and therefore they become entangled in different ways with Maya. So therefore, it said, Tasmat Gurum Prapadyeta Jigyasasayam Uttamam Sabde Pare Chanisnatam Brahmani Upasamasrayam. So it says, therefore, any person who seriously desires real happiness must seek a bona fide spiritual master and take shelter of him by initiation. The qualification of the bona fide spiritual master is that he has realized the conclusions of the scriptures by deliberation and is able to convince others of these conclusions. Such great personalities who have taken shelter of the Supreme Godhead, leaving aside all material considerations, to be considered to be bona fide spiritual masters. So this is the ultimate, let's say, instruction that one must find bona fide spiritual master, take shelter of them, regularly associate and follow the instructions, and to offer their life, their breath, their words, everything in the service of Guru and Krishna. So that was basically what most of us who came first to Krishna consciousness, or came in the early days of Krishna consciousness, understood from Prabhupada. We didn't understand all the intricacies of the philosophy, but we understood that Prabhupada was a pure devotee, and it was very rare to meet a pure devotee, and that we should completely surrender and do whatever he says, and just follow his instructions, because we had faith that his instructions were coming directly from Krishna. He was simply what's called the transparent via media of the Lord. One can be a transparent via media if they have no material motives. But if they have even one material motive, then they're no longer transparent. Transparent means there's no obstacle to the pure understanding of Krishna's words and instructions. So there's one example of a person who was teaching Bhagavad Gita as it is, but only changed one little thing. In the end, where Krishna says, Sarvadharmam parityaja mam ekam saranam vraja, where it says, give up all your fabricated occupational duties or dharmas and surrender unto me. So this person had taught Bhagavad Gita exactly correctly right up to that verse. And when it says, mam ekam saranam vraja, completely surrender unto me, he said, me, that means me. So he only changed one little thing, but that thing is so fundamental, and there's someone like this. I know someone who actually has done this. Unfortunately, this person is not alive anymore. His name was Adida. You can look him up on the internet. Adida. He's some American who was teaching Krishna consciousness using Prabhupada's books. He was telling his disciples, and he had a lot of disciples, to read Prabhupada's books to understand who he is. And he said that he is actually Krishna. And a lot of people believed it. You say, and all he did was change one little word in the Bhagavad Gita. Sarvadharmam Parityajya ma me come. When it says, only unto me, he said, me, that's me. You see. So this is how dangerous Kali Yuga is. You have these very clever rascals, demons, fools, who will try to imitate Krishna and befuddle people, and he gives them Prabhupada's books to read. See? So, therefore, it's very important to be able to meet devotees who are surrendered to Prabhupada, not devotees who want to replace Prabhupada and Krishna with themselves. So, therefore it says, any person who seriously desires real happiness must seek a bona fide spiritual master and take shelter of him by initiation. The qualification of the bona fide guru is that he has realized the conclusions of the scriptures by deliberation and is able to convince others of these conclusions. Such great personalities who have taken shelter of the Supreme Godhead, leaving aside all material considerations, should be understood to be bona fide spiritual masters. So, in other words, when it says sabde pare chadisnatam brahmani upasamasrayam, that is, that they have perfect knowledge, nisnatam, of the Supreme Absolute Truth, or Krishna. So they don't say, I am Krishna. They explain who is Krishna, and because they explain correctly who is Krishna, they can take the position of guru. And everyone has a chance to do this. It doesn't matter what family you were born in, or what race you are, or what color you are, what education you have or don't have. If you simply follow sincerely instructions Krishna has given through his pure devotees like Srila Prabhupada, and don't change anything, and don't have any personal motive, you can also become guru. Lord Chaitanya wanted everyone to become guru and spread this movement. So then it says, according to Srila Sridhar Swami, the word sabde refers to Vedic literature, and pare refers to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Sabde pare cha nisnatam, right? The bona fide spiritual master must be nisnatam, deeply experienced in authorized Vedic literatures and in practical understanding of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Without scriptural knowledge and practical realization of the Personality of Godhead, a so-called guru will be unable to dissipate the doubts of his disciples, and therefore unable to execute the functions of bringing the sincere student back home, back to Godhead. The symptom of realized understanding of the Vedas and Krishna is upasamasrayam. In other words, the bona fide spiritual master is one who has retired from glittering illusions of materialistic society, friendship, and love. So, to be able to dissipate the doubts of a disciple, that is a big thing, because we have so many doubts, all of us, due to being confused by material nature. What does material nature do? Maya throws us into the material world and then covers us with material illusion. So we're thrown and covered. Now, to unravel all that covering is not an easy thing. Therefore, a guru must be expert enough to answer all the doubts of the disciple. And those doubts are many. There are many things holding us back from completely surrendering to Kṛṣṇa. And therefore, it requires a long time to unravel those different layers of doubts, fears, anxieties, and so forth, so that a disciple becomes determined to remain Kṛṣṇa conscious through all different situations. Within the material world, one is certainly attracted to becoming a great intellectual, a powerful politician, the loving father of many beautiful and affectionate little children, a most honored welfare worker, or a highly admired and successful businessman. But none of these material positions have a permanent basis, nor do they afford permanent happiness, because they are all based on the primary misunderstanding by which one identifies himself with the material body. Anyone can readily experience that he is not the body, but consciousness. Even if one loses a limb of his body, he does not cease to exist as a conscious entity. Ultimately, the entire body is lost at the time of death, and a living entity acquires a new body. The preliminary understanding of one's identity as consciousness is called self-realization. Notice this is only the preliminary, the step, or understanding of one's identity. But beyond the elementary knowledge is the elaborate subject matter of how the soul came to exist within the cycle of 8.4 million material species of life. And if the living entity is not the material body, but consciousness, he must ultimately have an original status on a higher platform. That means that we actually came from the spiritual world. We fell down. Therefore, how we fell down, or why, not how, but why we fell down, is an important question that we have to ask and find out about. So we fell down because we became attracted by Maya and the idea of becoming God ourselves and being the enjoyer and the predominator and the controller and having possessions and so forth. So this is that dangerous mentality that everyone has in the material world, and it keeps them in the material world. So this is explained also in the 4th chapter, 4th verse, where it says, Sarvayonis Sukhanteya, Yuk Murtaye Sambhavantiya, Tasam Brahma Mahadhyonir Aham Bijapradapita. Krishna said, no, I'm sorry, not that one. Purusha Pakritisto hi bhunkte pakrite jai gunai. Karanam gunasangasya sadasad yoni janmasu. So, this verse says that by associating with 3 modes of material nature, one becomes a victim of Maya, and thus begins the process of samsara, changing their body. So, what is Maya's purpose? It's to attract the living entity to something that is not related to Kṛṣṇa. So that can be a business proposition, that can be sense gratification, that can be become a famous person, or become a movie star, or become this, or become that. So there's so many attractive things that people are attracted to, and once they get attracted to those things, they become entangled. So the Supreme Personality of Godhead said, who is greater than all, is attained by pure, unalloyed devotion. Although he is present in his abode, he's all-pervading, and everything is situated within him. So to be able to approach Kṛṣṇa, we have to engage in unalloyed devotional service. And that's not an easy thing when we still have these misconceptions and the bodily identification. So therefore, the constant association of devotees, the constant hearing and chanting, and the constant taking of prasadam with respect, and sharing things, and then coming to the point where ultimately our mind is always focused on how to spread this movement all over the world. Then we have a higher taste, and Vishaya Vinivaratante Niraharasya Dehinam. Rasavarja Rasapiyavsya Param Dristva Nivartate. We have this Param Dristva Nivartate, this higher taste of spreading this movement all over the world to everyone we meet. Then that becomes the overriding. And please, Prabhupada was always pleased by hearing about book distribution, about opening a temple, kirtan, advancing, and devotees being made, and so forth. He was very pleased hearing all these things. And therefore, we should strive to come to that platform of being an active preacher and trying to spread this movement, even if it's one person at a time. Prabhupada said to make one devotee, you have to spend 100 gallons of blood. Now, to understand what that means exactly is it takes about 2 to 4 pounds of food to make one drop of blood. So, just imagine how hard it is to make even one drop of blood. By the way, no doctor, no scientist has ever been able to make one drop of blood in a laboratory. They make facsimiles of blood, meaning some aspect of blood, but they've never been able to make the whole blood. If they did, they would be the richest person in the world. So, the human body is making blood on a regular basis, right? So, therefore, we're doing something naturally that the scientists are not able to do. Why? Because then they would be able to control everybody by such scientific discovery. But there are certain things that they cannot do because they're not God. But yet, we do it naturally in this body on a regular basis. So we should understand that there are some mysterious things that only Kṛṣṇa can do, and we shouldn't try and imitate those things, but rather we should use this facility of the material body to serve Kṛṣṇa. Otherwise, if we serve Maya, we'll be stuck, birth after birth, in the cycle of birth and death. Okay, we'll stop right there. This is, again, a big subject. Are there any questions?
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Yes.
So you mentioned that we fall down because of the Maya. So does that mean the Maya is predominant in the spiritual world as well?
No. No, it's like you're walking past a car, let's say a Tesla company, and you look in the window and you see a brand new Tesla. And you think, oh, it'd be so nice if I could have that car. And then you spend a couple of years saving money and you go and buy the car. So you were not inside that company. You saw from the outside and it looked very attractive. So you decided to spend your time and energy trying to buy that car. You see? So we see Maya from a distance, but she looks so attractive that even though we're in the spiritual world with a spiritual body, we become attracted. And then we start thinking about it and feeling how good it would be if we had that thing. So thinking, feeling, and then willing, and then deciding, I must have it, and then we fall down. Because we can't get our mind off of it. You see, that's the process. This explains 13th chapter, 22nd verse, where it says, Purusha Prakritisto he bhunkte prakriti jaragunan karanam guna sangasya sadasad yoni janmasu. It says, the living entity in material nature thus follows the ways of life enjoying the three modes of nature. This is due to his association with that material nature. Thus he meets with good and evil among various species. Prabhupada says, this verse is very important for an understanding of how the living entity transmigrates from one body to another. It is explained in the second chapter that the living entity is transmigrating from one body to another just as one changes dress. This change of dress is due to his attachment to material existence. As long as he is captivated by this false manifestation, he has to continue transmigrating from one body to another. Due to his desire to lord it over material nature, he is put into such undesirable circumstances. So this desire to control some part of all or all material nature and exploit it for our sense gratification, that's what is keeping us in this material world, and that's the original reason why we came. We want to be God. We might not have the power that Kṛṣṇa has, but if we can at least exercise some of that power, even on a small scale, then we feel as if we're successful. Therefore it says, nirmama nirahankara. One should not have any desire for possession, and nor should one have a false ego based on bodily identification. Sasantim adhigacchati. Then such a person attains real peace. But as long as we have the desire to possess things and to exploit things and people for our own sense gratification based on the body and the false ego, then we're trapped. We're prisoners. So how can you free yourself from that possessiveness? It's to use whatever you have in the service of Kṛṣṇa. You still have it, but now you're using it for Kṛṣṇa instead of for your own selfish purposes. So that's when you understand why we're trapped, and how we got trapped, and how we're remaining trapped under the grip of Maya, then you can see that Kṛṣṇa has made the process to free yourself from that very easy. Just chant, dance, take prasadam, hear regularly, and then preach. And do things to serve the Lord according to Prabhupada's instructions. So the process is simple, but our attachment is so strong that we won't let go. But you can, decide to surrender, and then there's different levels. There's Kanishta Adhikari, there's Madhyama Adhikari, and there's Uttama Adhikari. We'll discuss that tomorrow. So then, if you attain peace, and happiness, and knowledge, and realization, and then put all that to practical application and spreading the movement, then you feel greater joy, and you don't feel as if you lost anything by becoming Kṛṣṇa conscious. You realize that you gained something that's so precious, there's nothing comparable to it in the material world. And at that point, Kṛṣṇa starts revealing himself to you. Haribol. Okay, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Haribol.